Sarah Bennett stood at the entrance of the bustling Silicon Valley Convention Center, smoothing down her navy blue blazer. As a second-year law student from Howard University, she felt somewhat out of place among the sea of tech entrepreneurs and startup founders. The 2018 Global Innovation Summit wasn't her usual scene, but her professor had insisted she attend to network for her thesis on technology law and social justice. The morning California sun warmed her face as she checked her conference badge one last time. Sarah had worked too hard to let imposter syndrome hold her back now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the crowded lobby, her natural curls bouncing with each confident stride. Marcus Chen was running late. His presentation on ethical AI development was in 30 minutes, and his assistant had just informed him that his slides needed last-minute updates. At 32, he was already making waves in the tech industry with his startup, Future Tech Solutions. The company was gaining attention for its innovative approach to machine learning, but Marcus wanted more than just financial success. He wanted to make a real difference in the world. As he rushed through the convention center hallways, typing furiously on his phone, he collided with someone. His phone clattered to the floor, along with the other person's stack of papers. "I'm so sorry," they both said at the same time. Marcus looked up to find himself staring into the most captivating brown eyes he'd ever seen. The woman before him had a presence that commanded attention, professional yet approachable, with a warm smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Here, let me help you with those," Marcus said, quickly gathering her scattered papers. He noticed they were printouts about AI bias in criminal justice systems. "Thank you," Sarah replied, accepting the papers. "I should have been watching where I was going instead of reviewing my notes." "Are you presenting today?" Marcus asked, genuinely intrigued by her research topics. Sarah laughed softly. "Oh no, I'm just a law student trying to understand how technology is affecting our legal system, especially its impact on marginalized communities." Marcus's eyes lit up. "That's fascinating. I'm actually giving a presentation on ethical AI development in..." He checked his watch and winced. 25 minutes. "Would you like to attend? We could grab coffee afterward and discuss your research." Something about his earnest enthusiasm made Sarah pause. He wasn't like the other tech bros she'd encountered, who often dismissed her concerns about technology's social impact. "I'd like that," she found herself saying. The presentation went better than Marcus expected, partly because he kept catching glimpses of Sarah in the audience, nodding thoughtfully at his key points. When he discussed his company's efforts to eliminate algorithmic bias, she leaned forward with interest, jotting notes in her small leather-bound notebook. Later, at a quiet cafe near the convention center, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Marcus was impressed by Sarah's deep understanding of social justice issues and her practical ideas for reform. Sarah, in turn, was surprised by his genuine commitment to creating ethical technology. "Most tech companies treat diversity and bias as afterthoughts," Sarah said, stirring her cappuccino. "They only address these issues after the damage is done." Marcus nodded. "That's exactly why I started Future Tech. We need to build ethical considerations into the foundation of our technology, not just patch problems later." Hours passed as they shared their visions for the future. The cafe staff had started cleaning up for closing when they finally noticed the time. "I can't believe it's already evening," Sarah said, gathering her things. "I have a flight back to DC tomorrow morning." Marcus felt a sudden urgency. He didn't want this connection to end. "Can I get your number? I'd love to continue our discussion, maybe help with your research." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Okay, but only if you promise to tell me more about how you went from studying computer science to caring about social impact." As they exchanged numbers, neither of them could have predicted how this chance meeting would change their lives. Sarah left the cafe feeling energized, already looking forward to their next conversation. Marcus watched her walk away, knowing somehow that he had just met someone extraordinary. That night, in their respective hotel rooms, both Sarah and Marcus lay awake, replaying their conversation and wondering if this could be the beginning of something meaningful. Neither of them realized that their lives had just shifted onto a new path, one that would bring them both tremendous joy and heartbreak in the years to come. Over the next 3 months, Sarah and Marcus's connection grew stronger through daily phone calls and video chats. Despite being on opposite coasts, they found themselves sharing every detail of their lives. Marcus would call Sarah late at night after investor meetings, eager to hear her thoughts on his latest projects. Sarah would send him pictures of her study notes, smiling when he offered to quiz her on constitutional law. The first official date happened when Marcus flew to Washington, D.C. for a tech conference. He arrived a day early just to take Sarah to dinner at a small Ethiopian restaurant she loved near Howard University. The intimate setting allowed them to finally continue their conversations in person, without screens between them. "You flew across the country just for dinner?" Sarah asked, touched by the gesture. Marcus smiled, watching her expertly tear a piece of gingerbread. "I would flown further. Video calls aren't the same as seeing your smile in person." That evening marked the beginning of their whirlwind romance. Marcus started finding reasons to attend more East Coast business meetings. Sarah discovered that Howard's library had excellent weekend study hours, perfect for when Marcus would fly in to see her. They created their own little world between Silicon Valley and DC, building dreams together over coffee shop meetups and long walks through both cities. By the 6th month, their relationship had become serious. Marcus surprised Sarah by showing up at her moot court competition, sitting proudly in the audience as she delivered a brilliant argument. Later that night, at her favorite jazz club, he told her he loved her for the first time. "I never met anyone like you," he said, holding her close as they danced. "You make me want to be better, to do better." Sarah looked up at him, her heart full. "I love you too," she whispered back, realizing she had never meant those words more. Their different backgrounds sometimes created interesting dynamics. Sarah helped Marcus understand perspectives he'd never considered, opening his eyes to experiences beyond his privileged upbringing. In turn, Marcus supported Sarah's ambitions, never trying to dim her light, but instead helping it shine brighter. During spring break, they took their first vacation together to Puerto Rico. Walking along the beaches of San Juan, they talked about their future. Marcus's company was growing rapidly, with investors pushing for expansion. Sarah was excelling in law school, already receiving offers from top firms interested in her focus on tech law and civil rights. "We could build something amazing together," Marcus said one evening as they watched the sunset from their hotel balcony. "Your legal expertise, my tech knowledge, we could really change things." Sarah leaned back against him, smiling. "As long as we remember what's really important. Success means nothing if we lose sight of our values." But as future tech solutions gained more attention, subtle changes began creeping into their relationship. Marcus's calls became shorter, often interrupted by urgent business matters. The weekend visits grew less frequent, replaced by apologetic texts about investor meetings and product launches. Sarah tried to be understanding. She knew how much Marcus had invested in his company, how many people depended on its success. But she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. One weekend, when Marcus had to cancel their plans for the 3rd time that month, Sarah felt the first real crack in their foundation. "I miss you," she said during their brief phone call. "We hardly talk anymore." "I know, baby, I'm sorry," Marcus replied, distraction evident in his voice. "Things are crazy right now. We just got a major investment offer, and I need to focus on the negotiations." "There's always something, Marcus. At what point do we become a priority?" The silence that followed her question spoke volumes. They both knew they were approaching a crossroads, but neither was ready to acknowledge it yet. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, looking at their photos from Puerto Rico. The carefree smiles and loving glances captured in those images seemed to belong to different people now. Meanwhile, in his San Francisco office, Marcus stared at his phone, Sarah's contact photo glowing on the screen, as he wrestled with choices he never thought he'd have to make. The fairy tale was beginning to show its first cracks, but neither of them could have predicted just how deep those cracks would run. The breaking point came on a rainy October evening in San Francisco. Sarah had flown in to surprise Marcus for their 1-year anniversary, hoping to bridge the growing gap between them. She stood in the lobby of Future Tech Solutions, holding a small gift bag and wearing the dress from their first date. Marcus's assistant Jenny looked uncomfortable when she saw Sarah. "I'm so sorry, but Mr. Chen is in an emergency board meeting. You can't be disturbed." "It's our anniversary," Sarah said quietly, her heart sinking. He must have remembered. But the truth was, he hadn't. Upstairs in the conference room, Marcus was deep in discussions about a potential billion-dollar merger. His phone sat face down on the table, Sarah's missed calls going unnoticed. After 2 hours of waiting, Sarah finally texted him, "I'm in San Francisco. I guess this is what we've become." The message hit Marcus like a splash of cold water. He rushed out of the meeting, taking the stairs two at a time, but by the time he reached the lobby, Sarah was gone. All that remained was her gift bag on Jenny's desk. Inside was a framed photo of them in Puerto Rico and a handwritten letter. He found her at their favorite spot, a small park overlooking the bay. She was sitting on a bench, her dress damp from the rain, staring at the foggy horizon. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. The merger talks." "Stop," she interrupted, her voice steady despite her tears. "I don't want to hear about the merger, or the investors, or whatever else is more important than us." Marcus sat beside her, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "You know how important this deal is. It could change everything." "It already has changed everything," Sarah said. "When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked about my classes, my dreams?" The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words and broken promises. "I got the job offer," Sarah finally said. "The civil rights firm in D.C. The one that fights for tech accountability and digital privacy rights." Marcus's face lit up. "That's amazing. We should celebrate." "They want me to start right after graduation, in D.C. She turned to face him fully. "I need to know if we have a future, Marcus. A real one, not just video calls and canceled plans." The weight of her words hung in the air. Marcus felt torn between the empire he was building and the woman he loved. The merger would require his full attention for at least the next year. The investors were counting on him. Hundreds of employees depended on his leadership. "I can't leave San Francisco right now," he said softly. "The company needs me here." Sarah nodded slowly, as if she'd expected this answer. "And I need to be in D.C. That's where I can make the most difference." "We can make it work," Marcus insisted. "Once the merger is complete. There will always be another merger, another deal, another reason why your dreams come first." Sarah stood up, wiping her tears. "I love you, Marcus, but I won't put my life on hold waiting for you to remember I exist." "That's not fair," Marcus protested. "Everything I'm building, it's for our future." "No," Sarah cut him off. "It's for your future. I just became an afterthought along the way." She took off the small silver necklace he'd given her on their 6-month anniversary. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus. I hope all of this is worth what you're losing." As she placed the necklace in his hand, Marcus felt the finality of the moment. He wanted to stop her, to promise things would be different, but they both knew it would be a lie. Sarah walked away from the park bench, her figure disappearing into the foggy San Francisco night. Marcus sat there for hours, holding the necklace, feeling the weight of his choices. That night, two hearts broke in different ways. Sarah cried herself to sleep in her hotel room, mourning the death of their dreams. Marcus threw himself into work, trying to ignore the emptiness in his chest. Neither knew that this ending was just the beginning of a much longer story. 5 years passed like a whirlwind. Marcus Chen had become the tech world's golden boy, transforming future tech solutions into a global powerhouse worth billions. His face graced magazine covers, his name appeared in headlines, and his innovations changed the technology landscape. But in his penthouse apartment overlooking San Francisco Bay, success felt strangely hollow. Meanwhile, Sarah Bennett had built her own legacy. After graduating with honors from Howard Law School, she became a force in civil rights law. Her firm handled landmark cases against tech companies for digital privacy violations and algorithmic discrimination. Her passionate arguments in court and powerful advocacy for marginalized communities made her a rising star in legal circles. One morning, Marcus sat in his office, scrolling through news articles when he froze. There on his screen was Sarah's face, looking more confident and beautiful than ever. The headline read, "Attorney Sarah Bennett wins groundbreaking case against tech giant." "She's representing the families in the data breach lawsuit," his assistant Jenny informed him gently. She was one of the few who knew their history. Marcus read the article 3 times. Sarah had successfully argued that major tech companies were negligent in protecting user data in low-income communities. The victory would force the entire industry to change its practices. That same day, across the country, Sarah was celebrating with her team in their DC office. Champagne flowed as they toasted their victory, but her mind briefly wandered to another time, another celebration. She quickly pushed the thought away. "Miss Bennett," her assistant called out. "Time magazine wants to feature you in their 40 under 40 list." Sarah smiled, but her eyes caught a different magazine on her desk. Marcus's company was launching a new AI platform. She hadn't deleted her news alerts about him, though she told herself it was just professional interest. Their paths almost crossed at a tech conference in New York. Marcus spotted her in the crowd during his keynote speech, but she left before he finished. Sarah saw them at the hotel bar later that night, but chose a different restaurant for dinner. One rainy evening, Marcus found himself watching old videos on his phone. There was Sarah, laughing as they walked through Puerto Rico, her eyes bright with love and dreams. His finger hovered over her number, still saved after all these years. In her DC apartment, Sarah kept a box hidden in her closet. Inside was the frame she tried to give him that last night, the photo still perfect despite the years. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if she'd been too harsh, too unwilling to compromise. But then she'd remember the lonely nights, the broken promises, the feeling of being second best. Their professional lives continued to orbit each other. Marcus's company made headlines for its commitment to ethical AI development, policies that seemed surprisingly similar to ideas Sarah had shared years ago. Sarah's legal victories often targeted practices that future tech had notably avoided, though few knew why. "You never dated anyone seriously after her," Jenny remarked one day, organizing Marcus's schedule. Marcus stared out his office window. "How do you replace someone who taught you what really matters?" In DC, Sarah's mother asked similar questions. "You're not getting any younger, baby. A handsome doctor from church is still interested." Sarah would just smile and change the subject. How could she explain that her heart was still measuring everyone against a standard set years ago? The years had changed them both. Marcus had learned to balance ambition with humanity, implementing programs that brought technology education to underserved communities. Sarah had built a reputation for being brilliant but fair, willing to work with companies that showed genuine commitment to change. They were no longer the same people who fell in love at a tech conference. Success had shaped them, failure had taught them, and time had given them perspective. But in quiet moments, when the world wasn't watching, they both felt the echo of what they'd lost. Neither knew that fate wasn't finished with their story. The same universe that had pulled them apart was preparing to push them back together, but this time, the circumstances would be very different. The question was, had time healed their wounds, or just buried them deeper? The summer of 2023 brought waves of social change across America. Protests erupted in major cities after another case of police brutality went viral. Among the chaos, Sarah Bennett found her true calling. One Tuesday morning, Marcus was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when breaking news flashed across his screen. There was Sarah, standing on the steps of the Supreme Court, addressing a crowd of protesters and journalists. "We can no longer allow technology to be used as a tool of oppression," her voice rang clear and strong. "These surveillance systems disproportionately target communities of color. Today, we demand change." Marcus sat transfixed, watching as she masterfully laid out the case against police use of biased facial recognition software. She was more powerful than ever, her natural confidence now backed by years of experience and success. In the following days, Sarah's speech went viral. She appeared on major news networks, articulating how AI technology was being misused in law enforcement. Each time Marcus saw her, his heart twisted with a mixture of pride and regret. "Sir," Jenny interrupted his thoughts one morning, "the board is asking about our police contracts. With all this media attention." Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone. "Cancel them, all of them, and prepare a press statement. Future tech will no longer develop surveillance technology for law enforcement." The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech industry. In DC, Sarah was in the middle of a strategy meeting when her assistant burst in with the news. "Future tech just pulled out of all police contracts," she announced breathlessly. "They're citing ethical concerns about racial bias." Sarah sat back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. She recognized Marcus's hand in this decision. It was exactly what she'd argued for years ago during their late-night discussions. The next week, Marcus took an even bolder step. He announced a $500 million initiative to help minority communities access technology, education, and careers. During the press conference, a reporter asked what inspired the decision. Marcus paused, thinking of conversations from years ago. Sometimes, he said carefully, we need others to show us our blind spots. I learned that lesson from someone special long ago. In her DC office, Sarah watched the press conference live. For a moment, their eyes seemed to meet through the screen. She could see the change in him. The sharp business suit was the same, but his eyes held a new kind of wisdom. That evening, Sarah received an unexpected email from Jenny, Marcus's assistant. Miss Bennett, Mr. Chen would like to schedule a meeting to discuss potential collaboration between Future Tech and your advocacy group. Would you be interested? Sarah stared at the email for a long time. 5 years of carefully maintained distance hung in the balance. Her finger hovered over the delete button, but something stopped her. Instead, she typed, collaboration would benefit both our causes. Have his office send over the details. Meanwhile, Marcus stood at his office window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. On his desk lay a folder containing every article Sarah had written, every case she won, every speech she'd given in the past 5 years. He had finally understood what she tried to tell them long ago. Success meant nothing without purpose. She agreed to meet, Jenny announced, entering his office. Marcus nodded, his heart racing despite his calm exterior. Schedule it for next week. I'll fly to DC. Are you sure that's wise? Jenny asked gently. We could do it via video conference. No, Marcus replied firmly. Some conversations need to happen in person. That night, both Sarah and Marcus lay awake in their respective homes, thoughts spinning with possibilities. Sarah wondered if he had truly changed or if this was just another business move. Marcus questioned whether he deserved a second chance to even be in her presence. Neither knew that this professional reunion would test their carefully constructed walls. The causes they fought for would force them to confront not just their past, but also their present feelings. The question was, could they work together without reopening old wounds, or would this new connection reveal that some wounds had never really healed? The morning of their meeting arrived with a mix of tension and anticipation. Sarah's office buzzed with nervous energy as her staff prepared for Marcus Chen's visit. She had chosen to host the meeting on her turf, in the conference room where she won countless battles for justice. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early, his heart pounding as he stepped into the building. The office walls displayed framed newspaper headlines of Sarah's victories, constant reminders of everything she'd achieved without him. Mr. Chen, Sarah's assistant, greeted him. Miss Bennett will be ready in a moment. When Sarah walked in, time seemed to stop. She wore a burgundy suit that commanded respect, her natural hair styled in elegant twists. Marcus stood, suddenly aware that his rehearsed speech felt inadequate. Marcus, she said professionally, extending her hand. Welcome to DC. Sarah, he replied, their handshake lasting a moment too long. Your office is impressive. They sat across from each other at the conference table, a laptop between them like a barrier. Sarah's team filed in with presentations about their proposed collaboration, but Marcus couldn't focus. He kept noticing small things, how she still played with her pen when deep in thought, how her eyes still lit up when discussing justice reform. Your initiative is ambitious, Sarah said, reviewing Future Tech's proposal. $500 million for tech education in underserved communities. It's not enough, Marcus admitted, but it's a start. We need your expertise to make it work. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah saw sincerity in his gaze. Why now, Marcus? Why after all these years? The room fell silent. Her team shifted uncomfortably, sensing the personal weight behind her question. Because you were right, Marcus said quietly. About everything. Success means nothing if it doesn't create positive change. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Let's take a break. I think we need to discuss some things privately. They moved to her office, a space that reflected her journey, law degrees on the wall, case files stacked neatly, and a small photo of her with Supreme Court justices. You've done amazing things, Marcus said, looking around. I followed your cases. I know, Sarah replied. Jenny keeps me updated on your accomplishments too. Marcus smiled. She always had a soft spot for you. The familiar warmth in his voice made Sarah's heart ache. Why are you really here, Marcus? This initiative could have been handled by your team. Because I needed to see you, he admitted, to apologize properly, face to face. Sarah crossed her arms, protecting herself from old feelings. It's been 5 years. 5 years of learning what really matters. Marcus stepped closer. 5 years of realizing that all this success means nothing without purpose. Without. Don't, Sarah warned. We're here for business. Are we? Marcus challenged. Because I'm here to show you I've changed. That I finally understand what you tried to teach me. Sarah turned to look out her office window, gathering her thoughts. You broke my heart, Marcus. I waited in that lobby for hours. I know, his voice cracked. Not a day goes by that I don't regret that night, but I'm not that person anymore. She turned back to face him. Prove it. Show me this isn't just another business move. Give me a chance, Marcus pleaded. Work with us on this initiative. See the changes I've made. If you still think I'm the same person after that, I'll respect your decision. Sarah studied him carefully. The arrogant tech CEO was gone, replaced by someone more grounded, more conscious of his impact on others. One chance, she finally said, for the communities that need this program. But Marcus, she met his gaze firmly, don't make me regret this. They returned to the conference room, where Sarah's team waited anxiously. As they resumed discussions about the initiative, both felt the weight of unspoken words between them. That evening, as Marcus's car headed to the airport, he watched the DC skyline fade away. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. The proposal needs work. Same time next week? A smile spread across his face as he typed back. I'll be there. In her office, Sarah held her phone, wondering if she'd just made a huge mistake or taken the first step toward something beautiful. Only time would tell. 2 months of weekly meetings had passed, and the initiative was taking shape. Sarah and Marcus found themselves falling into a comfortable rhythm of collaboration, though both carefully maintained professional boundaries. Their teams noticed the subtle dance between them, the lingering glances, the inside jokes, the way they unconsciously mirrored each other's movements. Everything changed at the annual Tech for Justice Gala in Washington, D.C. Sarah arrived in a stunning gold gown, turning heads as she entered the ballroom. Marcus, who had flown in specifically for the event, felt his breath catch when he saw her. You look beautiful, he said when they finally crossed paths near the bar. Thank you, Sarah replied, smoothing her dress. You clean up pretty well yourself. The evening progressed with speeches and awards. Sarah took the stage to present the Advocacy Award, her voice strong and clear as she spoke about digital equality. Marcus watched from his table, remembering how she used to practice speeches in front of him years ago. Later, as the band played soft jazz, Marcus found the courage to approach her. Would you dance with me? For old time's sake? Sarah hesitated, knowing they had an audience. Dozens of eyes watched them, wondering about the relationship between the famous tech billionaire and the brilliant civil rights attorney. One dance, she agreed. As they moved across the dance floor, the years seemed to melt away. Marcus held her carefully, respectfully, but the familiar scent of her perfume brought back a flood of memories. Do you remember that jazz club in D.C.? He asked softly. Marcus, Sarah warned. Don't. I need to say this, he persisted. That night at the club was the first time I told you I loved you. I meant it then, and Sarah stepped back abruptly. We should go outside. We need to talk. They found their way to the gala's rooftop garden. The Washington Monument stood illuminated in the distance, a silent witness to their confrontation. You can't do this, Sarah said, her voice trembling. You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be okay. I'm not expecting anything, Marcus replied. I'm trying to show you who I've become. By what? Throwing money at social causes? Creating initiatives? Sarah challenged. How do I know this isn't just another phase before the next big business opportunity comes along? Marcus stepped closer. Look at my actions over the past 5 years. Every decision I've made since you left has been shaped by what you taught me. I've changed the entire direction of my company. Because it was the right thing to do, Sarah countered. Not for me. Yes, it was the right thing to do, Marcus agreed. But you were the one who showed me what was right. You were always my conscience, Sarah. Losing you made me realize what really matters. Sarah turned away, fighting tears. Do you know how many nights I cried over you? How many times I picked up the phone to call but couldn't? I know, Marcus said softly. Because I did the same thing. Then why didn't you fight for us? Sarah turned back, years of pain in her eyes. Why did it take 5 years? Because I wasn't worthy of you then, Marcus admitted. I needed to become someone who deserved a second chance. The honesty in his voice made Sarah's carefully built walls tremble. And now I know that all the success, all the money, means nothing if I can't share it with someone who keeps me grounded. Someone who challenges me to be better. Sarah wiped away a tear. You hurt me, Marcus. Deeply. I know, he stepped forward, gently taking her hands. And I'll spend every day making up for that if you'll let me. Not with money or initiatives, but with time, attention, and respect. Everything I failed to give you before. The moment hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear. The distant sound of music floated up from the gala, a reminder of the world waiting below. I can't go through that pain again, Sarah whispered. You won't, Marcus promised. I'm not asking for everything back. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I've become, the man you always believed I could be. Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for truth. The next words she spoke would either bridge their past to a new future or close the door forever. The weight of that decision pressed on her heart as the Washington night waited for her answer. 3 months after the gala, Sarah sat in her office reviewing the final draft of Future Tech's education initiative. The program had already launched in 5 cities, providing technology training to thousands of underprivileged students. But more importantly, it had given her a chance to see the changed man Marcus had become. During these months, they had rebuilt their relationship carefully, deliberately. Marcus had proven his commitment not through grand gestures, but through consistent actions. He attended every community meeting, listened to criticism without defensiveness, and implemented changes based on feedback from the communities they served. The latest reports from Atlanta are in, Sarah's assistant announced, entering with a folder. Mr. Chen is on his way up. Sarah smiled, remembering their first meeting 5 years ago. Now, Marcus visited D.C. weekly, not just for the initiative, but for their standing dinner dates where they rediscovered each other. Marcus knocked on her office door, carrying 2 coffee cups, her favorite caramel latte, and his black coffee, just like old times. Ready for the good news? He asked, setting her coffee down. Tell me, Sarah replied, accepting the drink with a warm smile. The Atlanta program has a 95% completion rate. Students are already receiving job offers from tech companies. His eyes shone with genuine pride. But that's not why I'm here early. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh. Marcus sat down across from her desk. I've been thinking about something you said 5 years ago, about dreams coming first. Marcus, Sarah began, but he continued. I'm stepping down as CEO of Future Tech, he announced. The board approved it this morning. Sarah stood up, shocked. What? Why would you do that? Because I'm ready to build something new, he explained. A foundation focused entirely on technology education and digital rights. And I want to build it here, in D.C. Sarah walked around her desk, processing his words. You're moving to D.C. If you'll have me, Marcus stood, taking her hands. I want to do this right this time. No more cross-country relationships, no more missed anniversaries, no more choosing business over love. Tears formed in Sarah's eyes. You're giving up your company. I'm not giving up anything, Marcus smiled. I'm choosing what matters most. The company will continue its mission, but I want to focus on work that brings me closer to you, not further away. Sarah studied his face, seeing the certainty in his eyes. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. These past 3 months have shown me that true happiness isn't in running a billion-dollar company. It's in working beside someone who shares your values, your vision, your heart. Sarah thought about their journey, the young law student and ambitious entrepreneur who fell in love, the painful separation that forced them to grow, and the mature individuals they'd become. The walls she built around her heart had slowly crumbled as Marcus proved, day after day, that he had truly changed. Remember what you told me in Puerto Rico? She asked softly, about building something amazing together? Marcus nodded, pulling her closer. I finally understand what that really means. So do I, Sarah smiled through her tears. And yes, I'll have you, here in DC, building something meaningful together. Marcus's face lit up with joy. From his pocket, he pulled out a small silver necklace, the same one she had returned that rainy night in San Francisco. I kept this, he said, holding it up, hoping that someday I'd be worthy of giving it back to you. Sarah turned around, letting him fasten the necklace around her neck. When she faced him again, they both knew they had come full circle. We have a lot of work to do, she said, touching the familiar silver pendant. We do, Marcus agreed. But this time, we'll do it together. No more choosing between dreams. We'll build new ones. As they stood in her office, the Washington Monument visible through the window behind them, they had finally found their balance. Their love story hadn't followed a straight path, but its detours had led them exactly where they needed to be. The initiative they had started together would change thousands of lives, but the greatest change had been in themselves. They had learned that true love sometimes needs time apart to grow stronger, that success means nothing without purpose, and that it's never too late for a second chance when both hearts are ready. This time, their future would be built on a foundation of shared values, mutual respect, and a love that had matured like fine wine, better with time and understanding.